Welcome back to installment 2 of Advanced Network Security Presentation 2. My name is Greg Mills, and this will be my final presentation for the Advanced Network Security class at East Carolina University. Today, I would like to talk to you about the use of multimode data and tactical data links for information fusion. So as we can see in the overview, first I want to explain to you what multimode data is. The different types of data that can be found, data fusion and what that means in military terms and on the battlefield, some issues that concern data looping and what we can do to ensure that that doesn't happen, how we secure these different types of multimode data, and then finally wrap it up with a conclusion, and hopefully you'll glean a little bit of information about the use of multimode data in the military environment. So what is multimode data? Multimode data is data that comes from different sources, protocols, modulation techniques, and different transport vehicles. And what I want to mention about transport vehicles is I'm not talking about planes, trains, and automobiles. I'm talking about the way it traverses across different media or mediums for moving from one point to another. So whether that be a serial connection, a parallel connection, an internet connection over standard RF signals, or satellite and other types of communication medium that signals can be processed across. Some examples of the multimode data that we have that is used commonly in a military environment is full motion video. I'm sure we've seen different drone footage of different aircraft taking full motion video in military environments. Next we have still images, and this is a little bit of an older technique that is still extremely widely used, and it's basically how we take a still image that we take at one point in time, and we compare that still image against a newer image that is taken at a later time. And when we compare and contrast those two images together, we can then see what kind of build-up activities have been made, or if new construction and things of that nature. Similarly to how we do on Google Earth. If you go on Google Earth, a lot of times you'll have new construction in your yard, and everybody goes on Google Earth to find out if their house has been updated so they can see their house or see a business that's been created or whatever. But what we do is we take an old image, compare it against a new image so that we can see what has been created in that environment. Next, we'll talk about quickly Link 16. Link 16 is a widely used tactical data link in the military. It basically uses RF modulation to connect platforms into a time-synchronized network that uses FDMA, CDMA, and TDMA in different aspects to transport signals across the internet. Instead of sending full images and full words, it operates by sending symbols that mean different things. So if I want to send another aircraft a track, if we'll call it a track, in which that track is a enemy battle tank that has a certain type of ammunition on it, I can send that across. But instead of saying this is a certain type of tank with this ammunition on it and it's at this location, I basically send a symbol in which the other aircraft's processor decodes that symbol, and it says, hey, that is this, because that's the symbol that they sent. Link 16 is a much more secure and robust network. It uses spread spectrum frequency hopping to kind of hide the signal, and it also uses different types of encryption, in which we'll talk about later. Link 11 is an older data link that is still widely used. It is widely used more for beyond line of sight communications, and it can be used over satellites or through high-frequency radios. And it uses more of a polling mechanism in which one station is the main station or the master station, and it will poll the other stations and give them so long to transmit their data. Anything they have above that period of time will have to wait until the next polling sequence to get that information across. Now, Link 16 and Link 11 are similar in fact that they're being used to transport data across and share information. However, the way they do that, the symbols they have, do not exactly correlate with each other. Link 11 is a much older protocol. It doesn't have the same capabilities. There are conversions to take what we call data words from Link 16 and strip the extra information off to send over Link 11. And vice versa, we have protocols in place that take the Link 11 data and convert it to a Link 16 word in which the terminals can see the information that's being transported across. Next, we'll talk about moving target indicator. Moving target indicator isn't as widely used in the military application, but basically it is how we show a vehicle is moving. So we can see through a radar system. So we can see a vehicle moving down the road and it'll send back that information. Well, that information has to be offboarded and sent to other entities for analysis. There's also a bunch of other sources. This is just a sampling of the different communication mediums, but that gives you an idea of what multi-mode data is. So as I said, there's different types of data. The full motion video is data collected from manned and unmanned aerial vehicles. We can see FMV through UAVs, drones, and even manned platforms that have an FMV capability. You could also take FMV video from the news or from other people that are on the ground using a camera and send that back and integrate it into the Fusion Center so that it can be analyzed as well. Like I was talking about with still images, is data collected by satellites or intel platforms or personnel on the ground, and that information is aggregated into a single source so that we can compare and contrast the information. Link 16, Link 11, we talked about a second ago, is a tactical data link that connects platforms together in multiple transport and data structures. So the word structures are a little bit different. The way that information is transported across the spectrum could be a little bit different. And it even varies within the different protocols. There's actually annexes that tell how that same data goes across different protocols. So in the case of Link 16 data can be sent over standard RF, but it can also be piped through the internet through different sources, also in serial connections and parallel connections or satellite communications. But it can be moved across multiple different mediums just by the different modulation techniques and how we use that data. Now, Link 16 is considered real time, but when you in the RF form, but when you move it to a non-RF into the IP structure, it becomes non-real time. Now, real time in the military is measured in nanoseconds. So we can't really go into a lot of the particulars, but real time, it has a certain connotation when it comes to military. Other sources like broadcast intel are out there, and that's simply different intelligence sources where we have already aggregated different intel platforms together to get a better picture for someone. And a lot of times we take that data from a top secret level and strip the top secret data off of it so that we can share it among secret platforms. Now, some platforms out there are considered top secret and some are considered secret. The personnel, it doesn't matter on the personnel, it all has to do with the security of the platform. Data fusion. Data that is collected by any platform is only relevant to that platform if it stays at their level, meaning that the data is only useful to other people if it is transported off board and sent to other places in which that data can be fused with other data to aggregate the signal together to create a stronger case of intelligence for a single entity. If you were to create a video and it stayed on your laptop, the only person that video would benefit would be you. However, if we take that video and upload it to the internet, then others can see that video and enjoy the content and maybe learn something from the video. If others were to create similar videos on a topic or a similar topic, then they would be able to use your video and other videos to learn that information better. Sort of like a peer review of other people's information and citing sources in a paper and things of that nature. But in the military, data fusion is where we take multiple pieces of data collected against a single entity and look at it from different vantage points to decide what the usefulness of this data is. That data must be transported to other places so that it can be aggregated together. The greater the aggregation, the more reliable the data and the higher quality the information is for usefulness. Now, when we do this, this increases the decision-making ability of the commander. We live in a world in which information is so prevalent that people will like as much information as they can get before making a decision against certain topics. The greater the information can be, the more reliable it is, and the better decision that one can make. Now, data looping. Data looping is something that happens when information is being sent from entities across the network in multiple formats. I was talking about how information is sent around through different protocols and different data links and modulation spectrums. But what happens when all of that data gets to a single entity from the same source but in different methods? This can create what's called a data loop. And data looping is receiving the same data from the same source via different protocols. So if we send something over a radio frequency modulation spectrum and then also send that same data to the same source using internet protocol, then it can create a data loop, especially if we take that information and send it back to the initiator of the information. The problem with this is it creates system problems and bandwidth degradation. So it could limit your processing power because you're using unnecessary processes to look at information that you already have. It's also not being a good steward of the limited bandwidth that you may need. So you could actually reduce the availability of the network because you're sending the same data to the same location in multiple different formats and using bandwidth that can be used for a higher priority. It's essential that the operators and the receivers of the information know and utilize proper filters and forwarding techniques. And that way we ensure that we're not data looping and we can prevent unnecessary use of bandwidth. Now, it is more essential for the person transmitting the data to ensure that their filter is correctly set up. Because if you rely on it just to be at the receiver end, you've already lost that data, and it's going to take processing time and energy to block that data from coming in. However, if you do it from the transmission source, then that data is not sent to those individuals. Now, this is a quick illustration of what data looping actually is. We have a few different nodes here connected to the central controller. Airborne Node 1 and Airborne Node 2 is sending intelligence data that they're collecting over the battlefield through a satellite down to the central controller. The central controller is sending that information down to ground nodes 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now these ground nodes are also sending information back to the central controller of things they're seeing and the decisions they're making. However, as you see, Airborne Node 2 is also within line of sight of ground node 3 and 4 and is sending that information directly to ground node 3 and 4. Now, it is inherent that ground node 3 and 4 set up filtering techniques so that they are not sending information to the central controller from Airborne Node 2. It's also important to know that the central controller not send information to ground node 3 and 4 that is coming from Airborne Node 2. There is a large filtering and forwarding matrix that the central controller, ground node 3, 4, and the airborne node need to put in place to ensure that they're not sending the same data to all of these participants in multiple different formats. But if the network in between airborne node 2 and the satellite were to go down, central control could get the information from ground node 3 and 4 and send that to central control, and then central control can disseminate that information down to the other platforms that are not able to connect directly to airborne node 2. The key is ensuring your matrices are correctly set up so that you're not creating a data loop, but you're set up so that everyone can receive that signal. Security. Security is big when it comes to this multimode data. It depends on the level of classification of the data as well as what's actually being transmitted. So depending if the information is secret or top secret will create a higher level of security that is applied. Now, I don't want to get into too specific of how we encrypt the secret and top secret data. However, I will tell you that the higher the security measures, the higher the encryption levels are on these different types of data. Now, I was saying earlier about Link 16 using spread spectrum frequency hopping. Any jam where you're taking a signal and hopping from one spot to another in the same frequency band is not necessarily encryption. It makes it difficult for the signal to be found and for the information to be pulled. However, it is not encryption in itself, and it does not secure the network. So in Link 16, we use something specifically called Reed-Solomon encoding, and where we take 15 bits of data and turn it into 31, and then we also use message security, in which we use an algorithm developed by the cryptographic key that we use. Now, this key takes the data and splits these symbols up into chips, and each one of these chips is encrypted in a different manner. Now, this is all done through timing and through the actual message security. We also apply a transportation security, which encrypts the data again, and it also determines the hopping pattern of the transmission. And when I say hopping pattern, in the case of Link 16 hops different frequencies 77,000 times in a second. So it is imperative that everybody be correctly synced together so that they know what radio frequency they need to be on to listen for the incoming signal. In the case of other types of data and over Internet Protocol, the military uses something called HAPI encryption, or High Assurance Internet Protocol Encryptor, and it is a standard across the DoD networks for encrypting of secret data across information protocol networks. Conclusion. So I've kind of gone through a little bit of what multimode data is, the different types of data, some data fusion, data looping, and the security of these networks. Now, this is a very brief overview of a much deeper subject of multimode data and data fusion. But if you would like more information, you can direct any of your questions to me back at my student account, or please feel free to ask something in the forums. I hope you enjoyed the presentation and enjoy the rest of your class.